Hello everyone and welcome to this video where we have a lot to talk about. Today was the question and answer session with the Stormworks developers. We got a lot of information on the upcoming things related to Stormworks and the game called Not Stormworks 2. So buckle up, we're going to go through Stormworks items in this video. I will make another video. It's finally time to talk about Not Stormworks 2. We've gained some new intel on that game, but here we're just talking about Stormworks itself. So I'm going to go through some of the items I took notes on. I have 2 pages worth of notes. This is supposed to be a summary video for those of you that didn't get a chance to listen to the whole thing. And we're going to also talk about the implications that some of these things have, not just what was discussed, but how that actually may affect Stormworks, the game, as it kind of moves into the future here. So let's begin. For starters, there was the usual comments on fixing multiplayer, fixing and speeding up the game, etc. For that, all I'm going to say is that the developers said that for this, they need some way to identify the issues, whether it's PC related, whether it's related to the server, whether it's related to Stormworks itself, etc. I'm not going to get technical on that, but pretty much kind of the fixing and making things run smoother. I mean, it all depends how you use the game. It all depends on your own system. For me, for example, in my tests, it works perfectly, and even in simple multiplayer games, when I have kind of a few people and a few creations, obviously if you want to change the whole world, spawn a bunch of stuff, I mean, you got to think where this game came from in 2018 and how far it's come. I would say it works pretty good. Now, some of you may disagree, and that's totally fine. Again, depending on your own system, depending on how you play the game. So I kind of see it as a limitation of not just the game itself. Yes, there are the discussions of the threads and all the cores and whatnot, but we're going to kind of skip through that, get more to the actual point of the game, especially when it comes to updates and stuff. So, NPCs. There are no plans to add NPCs, no plans to add sea monsters, fish, things like that. The game is kind of what it is, and actually something that was mentioned a bunch of times, I will say, is that the developers explicitly said they don't really have plans to change the visuals, let's say, of the game. And I'm sure modding will handle a lot of that, as it already has with the different kind of areas we have in modding and, you know, new trees, cities, stuff like that. But they really don't have, you know, the want to add, for example, different decor or different kind of like non-functional things, let's call it. So mechanics is something they're heavily interested in changing in Stormworks, or adding, not changing, but adding to. And that's something that we really love. Like for me, I find that fascinating and perfect because end of the day, it's a building game, more building blocks of different types, and I'm a happy camper. One really cool thing that was discussed, that someone brought up, was floats for seaplanes. Now, with regards to changing the water physics, the developers said that that is not in their scope, and truthfully, I fully agree with that. I really do support not changing the game, not breaking creations. People have invested so much time, and any changes like that, I mean, we've seen it with the Storm update, Space update, where they introduced the compressed gases, and things were a little wonky for a bit. In the end, they fixed it, and I do got to give it to them for their diligence, because obviously, in bringing in the compressed gases did change the game a lot, but I think it changed it for the best. Some of you may disagree, that's fine, but it did make it more realistic, in my opinion. So, anyway, changing the water physics and things like that is not something they have in mind. But one thing I did find interesting is that they did express, or some interest in adding floats. So kind of the way we have certain floats in the game, I'm talking about like the one float item we have currently. It would be kind of expanded to get other variants and versions and stuff. So I think that's kind of neat. That would be very interesting for me. But one thing that they did not want to do is add the negative mass, kind of like the negative mass I'm using for some of my creations, where if the ship itself is too heavy and you could end up kind of getting it better or getting it a little more realistic in my opinion. But keep in mind, with a game based on fully kind of a one block system, if you will, meaning you use the same materials for ships, for cars, for planes, etc., there are going to be some limitations, and that's absolutely normal and fine. But so no negative mass, but possibly more buoyancy blocks or buoyant blocks. That's kind of neat. Windows. A lot of people have been asking for upgraded shapes and sizes, including myself. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. I mean, while I do make use of my windows kind of looking Stormworksy, there are people who do it better. There's XML modding. Ultimately, so for me, I thought it would be easy for them to introduce kind of like how we have different wedges, the 1x4 and 1x2. I thought that it'd be easy for them, but the biggest issue is underwater. The water can simply not function on a surface that is not like 45 degrees. So you end up with pretty much an issue where where it glitches through. It doesn't look polished. It doesn't look good. So they're saying, yeah, go ahead, XML mod it, but they're not going to go and make it a part of an official update, which is fair. The clipping of the water is kind of a bit of a eyesore, I suppose. There are very interesting things where we're talking about the new update, specifically with the hopper belt. And what I'm talking about there is the ammo belt, well, in hopper form. And I actually mentioned that in one of my videos, and I will fully give myself credit for that one, that pretty much I said that it would be a great addition to the game to not just have ammo belts where we could kind of have that style, but have hoppers and other industrial style things that we could use. And I think that that's a great thing. So I was actually shouted out at that point, so thank you, Deltars. I think that's a huge honor of mine to be a part of this community, to be shouted out, and I honestly love adding to the game and giving my suggestions and ideas. I think it's really rewarding to me, so I'm super happy to do that. There we go. Where we get a different style of those things, kind of conveyor style, or like hoppers or chutes or what have you. I mean, I've designed some of these things in real life, so that's really cool for me. Hydrogen fuel source, that was one item that was kind of discussed. Is there a future for hydrogen more than just kind of the water, kind of the stuff we have now? So almost a little bit more intricate way to use that hydrogen. There will be sort of some looking into of the potential of that, which is really cool for me. The potential for a new fuel source, if you will. Different shape for MCs was discussed, round microcontrollers instead of the square ones. I'm thinking that's specifically for kind of missiles, so they look a little more natural and normal. But I do think there's other applications where it would just look nice. I mean, also for me, a block of the microcontroller to look kind of like a block rather than to look like a microcontroller might be cool, but it does kind of change the game up substantially. I'm saying, so like, see that on top? So it doesn't look like that, it just looks like a bunch of 1x1 blocks. Would make kind of aesthetics, I'd say, a little bit nicer in certain aspects. But that aside, there was something else that was brought up by another user, which I actually think is really cool. They asked if there's the possibility, if I could get out of here, if there's the possibility that they make the, nodes overlapped. So if you can have overlapping of nodes, specifically ones that are of a different type. So like, obviously not if you have the Boolean and on-off, because those are all in the same plane. But for example, what's not on the same plane or what's on a different plane is the audio and composite. So in theory, you could actually on a microcontroller place the composite on the same slot. It already has that in the game. Like, we can already place them, it just doesn't allow us to spawn it. So that could be something that would be a game changer for mini subs, for ROVs, for pretty much anything that has things in various channels. So if you have something as Boolean and something as composite, then you can kind of make it work. So that's really cool. Rails. People asked in one of the previous Q&As about adding kind of a electricity line above, kind of like a tram type line. So something where you have more or less like power feeding in through wires, and that was kind of talked about as something that's a no-go, just because it not only, like, things like that not only add kind of to the game and slow things down, but how often would that be used for most users? And truthfully, like, I probably wouldn't, because I like the kind of common in North America diesel electric style locomotives, so they have their own power plant rather than being fed by the grid. But there was an interesting discussion of a third rail, and that third rail would be like a node that goes on your rail wheels, and in essence it allows you to power your vehicle, your train, through that third rail wheel. In that same discussion, or in a different discussion but on that same note, they actually talked about adding the smaller rail wheels, which would go perfect for the high rail truck. I'm actually using the non-high rail version of my high rail truck, so having smaller wheels where they're not weighing so much would actually be great. What I currently have is pretty much a system that, you know, adds a lot of weight. It works, it's fine for bigger vehicles, but for smaller vehicles, I definitely think smaller tracks, wheels like rail wheels, would be better. There was a cool discussion on having bar and radial segments on a single block. So currently you have the bar and radial segments on things like the instrument panel, but having them on a single block, like a big block like this with a bar and radial, that could be quite interesting. And actually, I'm going to go a step further and say having the different shapes, such as the triangular and even this type of kind of flip switch in large format, so in like a single button format, would actually be fascinating. It would add to the game in my opinion, and it would just make it a little, it would be a little more tied together, because currently we have those elements in the game already, just in the instrument panel form. So having a single composite and a bar radial would be nice. Having the ability to change the buttons, so we have kind of up and down buttons, would also be great. So that's something that was talked about, not in that exact same form, but in essence, and I thought that was quite neat and interesting. Then the topic of fishing and nets, and the fishing nets and camo nets came in. I'm going to go a step further and say adding the ability, or having the ability to have a fabric that you could make like a tent out of, but not to have an actual, not to have it as, to not have it as a something that picks up wind. So you have a net, or a or you have a fabric that you could make a tent out of, and not have to worry about it catching wind. So you could make permanent structures, you could do decor, all kinds of stuff. I thought that's really cool. Someone asked about hunting. They said probably not, but we'll look into it. I think hunting for animals would be quite cool. It would kind of add to that aspect we already have in the game, and I think I talked about in my other video with the one of the videos with the camper, I believe, where I kind of wish there was like a hunting style rifle. That would be kind of cool. It'd also be neat to add a tranquilizer gun. So if you don't want to kill the animal, you can actually just tranquilize it and kind of falls asleep. Not sure how that would work in the game, but I think it would be it'd be kind of cool to also do that for missions, not just if you're trying to kill the animal, but if you're trying to like save somebody or transport an animal from one place to another. That could be neat. Another thing that was discussed was the scenery. So someone asked, oh, are you going to upgrade the scenery in Stormworks? And they said that no, the scenery is kind of staying as it is. They want to focus on the mechanics. I told you that earlier. So anything along that line of kind of like non-functional, let's call it, non-mechanical, was sort of deemed not what they're trying to go with Stormworks, and it's not that that's never going to happen. As you've seen, someone actually pointed out that a while ago Deltars said that they wouldn't be adding the ability to have the ammo belts, yet later on that ended up being something they added. So it's not like never ever ever, it's just that's not something they're looking for at this time. There was one thing I found really cool, and I know this has been a hot topic and people were kind of talking about it, but pretty much someone had asked Deltars if, or why can't I cool my modular engine? Like, the modular engine keeps overheating, and they actually pointed out saying, well, are they not meant to be driven at full speed or full throttle? And the answer was yes, exactly that. And to be honest, I find that quite realistic and refreshing. It's not like you just need to full throttle all the time for everything. There are certain instances where you don't want that, and if you want a full throttle, you can't do it for an extended period of time. You got to do it for a certain time, and after that, you know, you got to be smart. So there are good ways of cooling, but end of the day, if you have to reduce the throttle, you got to reduce the throttle. You can't simply just 100% throttle. So that was kind of cool. I know there are mods that introduce different shaped radiators. I would really love like a 3x1 or something, a smaller radiator for the modular engines, especially for my smaller creations, where you could just simply put them in, and maybe they don't cool as well, but they're still better than nothing. So I would really find that great, but I know there are mods out there for that too. We're getting near the end. One person asked about sonar and if you could add, or if they can add, sort of the ability to have a sound picked up by the sonar, so you can almost interpret different sizes of boats or engines or something like that. And that was sort of an idea that they said they would potentially look into, which is quite nice. And then yours truly, I asked whether or not there's the ability to add new shipwrecks, just because you know how much I love my OMA faction, and I kind of really enjoy putting out content and underwater creation, stuff like that. So they did say that the shipwrecks that are in the game are probably the ones that are going to stay, but I did also have a sub point which said I would really love for there to be kind of interactiveness with these shipwrecks, whether it be in the form of a mission, like you come down and there's some buried treasure or something, but some type of thing to make it, you know, worth your while to explore said wrecks, other than kind of the standard $5,000 to $10,000 kind of reward. This case, it would actually give you something a bit more challenging too, like an actual mission type thing versus just, you know, you get there. So that was what I did ask. I did think about a lot, and I know there were a lot of good questions. Some of you beat me to some things I had in mind, so I really found that session enjoyable. I do got to thank Deltars for the time and effort put into answering these questions. I love the community engagement. I think it's fantastic, and just kind of the ability to gauge what the community thinks, where we're seeing the game going, and that type of thing. So thank you all for watching. Hopefully that did help you out to get kind of an idea, feel for what they have coming on for the game in the next little while. There was talks of a DLC, sorry, not a DLC, but talks of a major update, but they don't quite know where that major update would be going. So feel free to drop in the comments what you think about your idea of what a major update could be. They did mention small updates, including what I would find so useful, the ability to categorize our creations in the workbench. I think that's something that is missing. I have to kind of use my shorthand script for that, and you know, I found a way around it, but ultimately I think there are better ways to do it. So that would maybe be a possibility, and that makes me quite happy. But regardless, they do have some other updates and things planned. They didn't go into detail, but the game is not being abandoned. Rest assured that the game is going to keep going on, and even the Not Stormworks 2 is exactly that. It's not Stormworks 2. Stormworks will keep existing, keeping updated as long as folks are playing, and currently they're quite happy with the number of people constantly playing. So thank you, Deltars, thank you, developers, for the awesome game. I can't say it enough. Thank you to my community and the whole Stormworks community, and thank you to my supporters. I really appreciate you guys, and it's great interacting with you, giving you early access to videos, to creations and stuff. It's awesome. I love it. If you're interested, take a look. But these people are awesome. They really do give me an extra ounce of support, which does come in handy sometimes, especially as I'm like sometimes struggling between all of my priorities. That helps. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So thanks for watching once again, and until next time, happy Stormworksing, everyone.